So Iran had an election recently. I want to break it down for you and give you all the information you need to know about their new president. So the former president is a guy by the name of Hassan Rouhani. He's a moderate, and he was one of the people who led the charge to get the nuclear agreement with the United States and actually with the international community. So it was under Hassan Rouhani that we got the Iran nuclear agreement. Now, that deal, to sum it up, goes like this. The United States and the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, get to do inspections routinely and check in on the nuclear program of Iran. Iran can have nuclear power, but just to do power for their power grid for their people and do research. And there's a big difference between enriching uranium to the point where you can do that and enriching uranium to get a weapon. So anyway, the international community would get to regulate that and make sure they never create a weapon. And what we would give them is their own money back, and we would lift a lot of the sanctions on them. That was the idea of the deal. It was working flawlessly. It was working perfectly. They were totally in compliance with the deal, and we were following the deal until Trump came in. And, of course, we reneged on the deal, and we started sanctioning them. So we violated the deal repeatedly. And then now we're in this weird limbo phase where they're like, okay, I guess we're going to enrich uranium further now. I guess we're going to go to create a nuclear weapon. And the international community is holding on to hope to get back in the deal. The U.S., Biden said he would get back in the deal. He hasn't gotten back in the deal yet. So anyway, that's where we are now. Now, I'm going to come back to everything I just said here. There's a cherry on top response that is going to drive you crazy. But now Hassan Rouhani's out of power. He wasn't able to run again. But there were other moderate candidates who had potential to maybe do well, but the Revolutionary Guard banned them from running. So you had a couple puppet moderates who nobody really knows who ran, and one of the people they were running against is the guy who had lost to Hassan Rouhani last time, and here's what happened. So the guy who won is a hardliner. His name is Ebrahim Raisi. He's basically as hardline as it gets. And by the way, my buddy from Iran broke this all down for me, and I want to thank him for giving me a good education on this. So the Guardian Council disqualified all the other big moderate figures, like I just said. Two very weak ones ran. Nobody knew them or liked them. The big two moderates that people were expecting to run were Larijani, he's former head of parliament, and Jahangiri, that's Rouhani's first vice president, but they were disqualified and they weren't allowed to run. Raisi is the head of the judiciary, appointed by the Ayatollah. He ran in 2017 and lost to Rouhani. He didn't get many more votes this time compared to 2017, but the people who would have voted for moderates didn't show up to vote, and it was mostly due to disqualifications, but also moderates lost a lot of support during Rouhani's second term because with the implosion of the nuclear agreement, we're right back to square one, and their economy is really in tatters, and of course they were dealing with a COVID outbreak as well. So in the end, Raisi got 16 million votes back in 2017 when he lost to Rouhani, and this time he got 17.8 million. But get this, turnout was only 48% in this election, and last time it was 73%. So the people who voted for Rouhani last time, they didn't end up voting for Raisi, they just stayed at home because they were dissatisfied with the electoral system or they felt like everything was hopeless. So Raisi is completely against working with the West. He was against doing the nuclear deal in the first place. He's a religious fundamentalist. He was one of the 4 prosecutors who were involved in the mass execution of political prisoners in 1988. So they literally were called the Council of Death. The Revolutionary Guards love him, and they want him to be the next supreme leader after the Grand Ayatollah passes away. But he doesn't have the religious qualifications, or at least not yet. I don't know if he ever will, but he doesn't have the religious qualifications in order to be the supreme leader. So he's known as a guy who isn't corrupt financially and personally. He's not after personal wealth, but he is a true believer in the Islamic Revolution. And on social issues, he's super conservative. He supports gender segregating universities and government agencies. Schools are already segregated. He didn't run based on this stuff, but he is for harsh Islamic punishment like cutting limbs and an eye for an eye. He's for massive internet censorship. He's against live music. He believes women should do their family duties before doing any work. He's just as socially conservative as it gets. On economics, he doesn't really have any plans or policy, but he's against any policies that involved economic links with the West. Again, this is the guy who won. So overall, he's basically a puppet of the Ayatollah. He's aligned with the Ayatollah on most issues, and the Ayatollah is significantly more conservative than Hassan Rouhani was. Again, the president was one of the ones who led the charge in getting us the nuclear agreement. This is an interesting fact too. Ahmadinejad, who was the former president of Iran, he's pretty popular these days, and he ran, but he was disqualified from running, and then he openly boycotted the election, which was kind of hilarious. So he told his supporters not to participate in the election. So that guy who was in power sort of wanted to get back in power, and the Revolutionary Guard was like, you're done. And also, Ahmadinejad is an interesting character because what he did when he was in office, he actually made the office of the president more powerful than it ever was before. You could argue previously it was just more of like a ceremonial thing because the Revolutionary Guard and the Grand Ayatollah are running everything. But then, Ahmadinejad went in there and he sort of made the role of president more powerful, which is interesting. So now I want to show you something that says it all right here. Take a look at this. The big Iran elections takeaway for me is how many have lost hope that voting brings change. This is the number of people who voted for reformist and moderate candidates since Khatami. Huge drop. So Khatami's like the more left, biggest left leader you can say in Iran. But you have, look at this, starting from the bottom up. In 1997, 20.1 million voted for moderates. 2001, 21.6 million. 2005, 16.7. 2009, 13.6. 2013, 18.6. 2017, 23.6. 2021, 2.4. Wow. So a huge drop-off. So there's a few things to say here. Number one, it's basically rigged. The rigging was done by the Revolutionary Guard and the Grand Ayatollah, who disqualified any of the moderate candidates with a chance up front. So huge rigging. Okay, that's the first point. The second point, though, is this. A lot of this is the making of the United States. Now, I told you I'd go back to the point I made first, later on. Well, here's the point. The moderates went out on a limb when they said, let's make a deal with America. Let's do a nuclear agreement with America. Let's have the international community come in here, regulate us, make sure we don't create a weapon, and in return, we'll get sanctions relief. And the moderates were arguing, you can make a deal with the United States, they'll honor the agreement. And if they honor the agreement, guess what? We'll have sanctions relief, so our economy will be doing way better than it is right now, being strangled by the international community right now. People will be happier, and it'll actually further embolden the government. And it'll make people, happy that things are better. Well, now they look like total idiots, don't they? The moderates look like idiots because the hardliners got to turn to them and say, you guys told us we can make a deal with America and America would uphold the deal. And then we'd get a flourishing economy and we'd all be better off. Well, we gave you the opportunity to make that deal and we gave America the opportunity to honor that deal. You made the deal, America didn't honor the deal, and now we're worse off. So the hardliners got to look at the moderates and say, you were just made a fool of. America made a fool of you. And of course they would argue the great Satan, the world's sole imperialist power, just made a fool of you. You made a deal with the devil, and the devil reneged on the deal. What did you learn? So now the hardliners look like they were right all along. And the moderates look silly. And this is the result. This is what happened. And so guess what? Now we're in a position where it's much more likely that Iran will get a nuclear weapon, and it's much more likely we will continue to raise tensions. Because if you were going to get any sort of deal, and it was going to be reasonable, it was going to be with the moderates. The hardliners are against working with the West at all. And honestly, in some ways, you can't blame them. And so now there's not going to be a peace deal. Now, tensions are going to continue to rise with not only with us and Iran, but with Iran and Israel. Now you're at a permanent war footing and a standoff. and there's a breakdown of any sort of communication, there's a breakdown of any sort of negotiation, all of this was avoidable. The world would have been a safer place if we made the deal and we stuck to the deal. Because again, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. The IAEA says, hey, they were following the deal every step of the way. We were the ones who violated it. We're the ones who pulled out of it. We're the ones who sanctioned them, which is a clear violation of the deal. We've sanctioned medicine going into Iran, guys. Medicine. The International Criminal Court said you're not allowed to do that. You know what our response was? To chastise the court and pull out of it and say we're going to keep sanctioning medicine going into Iran. So now the moderates look stupid for wanting to do a deal with the West. And now the hardliners look like they predicted all of it, and now people are more supportive of the hardliners. Again, it's also rigged, and basically the Revolutionary Guard and the Grand Ayatollah made it so that the hardliners would win. But still, they probably would have won anyway, even if you allowed the moderates to run. They probably would have won anyway. Because a lot of the people who put hope in the system, who put hope in the moderates, well, the U.S. ruined the deal, pulled out of the deal, and so now everybody who was on that side looks silly, and now you have hardliners there, and guess what? Hardliners always lead to more hardliners. So Trump was a hardliner, and him being hardline led to their hardliners rising, and if they do more hardline shit, it'll lead to us doing more hardline shit, and around we go. So this all could have been avoided. It all could have been avoided. It all could have worked out. But it didn't. And the United States of America needs to understand this is the shit that ruins our credibility around the world. And it does. It is ruined. It is. That's what it is. Nobody should take our word for it. Also, look at what we did in Libya. Gaddafi was like, here, take my weapons because I don't want to get toppled by you. Then we took the weapons and we toppled him anyway. John Bolton said to Kim Jong-un in North Korea, we want to do the Libya model with you. What? That means they want him to give up his weapons and then we'll topple him anyway. The war in Iraq was illegal under international law. We said we don't care, we're going to do it anyway. The Paris Climate Agreement, we crafted that, and then Trump was like, I'm done with it, pulling out of it, we're not going to do that. The Iran deal, detailed deal, immediately we pulled out of it and sanctioned them. So who the fuck would want to listen? Who would want to do any deal with us? Who would want to listen to us? Who would want to cooperate with us? Nobody. Because we flip-flop every day 1,000,000 times and go back on treaties and ignore international law. There are consequences for that shit. And then you got, the rise of China with the Belt and Road Initiative. We're doing this shit to ourselves. We're our own biggest problem. So our word means nothing. Why would anybody trust a deal with the United States? Ever. We don't honor them at all. And as a direct result of that, now the hardliner won in Iran. So somebody who's not in favor of peace won because when we tried peace, we stabbed him in the back and said, fuck peace. So now they're saying, fuck peace too. We have a bunch of idiots and we have a bunch of corrupt goons running our government. And shame on Biden too. Trump was the one who ruined it and pulled out of it and all that stuff. But shame on Biden for not getting back in that agreement on day fucking one. Day one. We violated the deal and we pulled out of the deal. And then Biden has the nerve to say, yeah, maybe we'll get back in, but Iran needs to do X, Y, and Z first. Excuse you? We violated it and we pulled out of it and you're making demands? You should get back in the deal and have a formal apology and say, our bad, that previous guy was crazy. We're going to abide by the deal. You have my word. You have the word of the United States of America, which is good as gold. He didn't say that. It's a sick joke. When you vote in the U.S., you're voting for neocon or neocon light. Neocon or diet neocon. Here we are. Could have had peace. Did have peace for a while until we ruined it. And corporate media will never tell you these facts. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.